Well, good morning. Happy Friday, and welcome back to our podcast workshop series. This is the third workshop in our series. We're going to be focusing on editing audio in Audacity. Oops, and I just clicked a link. Sorry, hang on one second. I can't find. Okay, there we go. There we go. My Zoom control was covering up things. Okay, now we're getting started. So as always, we begin with our land acknowledgement. For millennia, the Kumeyaay people have been a part of this land. This land has nourished, healed, protected, and embraced them for many generations in a relationship of balance and harmony. As members of the San Diego State community, we acknowledge this legacy. We promote this balance and harmony. We find inspiration from this land, the land of the Kumeyaay. And I also want to acknowledge that this workshop wouldn't be possible without several tools that we're using to connect. First, Zoom, which is headquartered on the traditional lands of the Ohlone and Tamiyan people in what we now call San Jose, California. As well, we rely heavily on Google, which is based on the traditional lands of the Tamiyan Nation, the Ohlone, the Ramaytush, and the Muwekma peoples in what we now call Mountain View, California. These technologies, which allow us to connect across vast distances, are not without invisible costs, both in terms of human labor and environmental impact. And I also want to acknowledge that a land acknowledgement is a starting place and not an action in and of itself, that it cannot by itself remedy past, current, and future injustices. So in this week of Indigenous Peoples Day, and with all of the violence in the world right now, just want to invite folks to start that conversation. But again, it is not a stand-in for action. Before we continue, I should actually introduce myself. I'm Pam Lach. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the Digital Humanities Librarian here at San Diego State, where I run our Digital Humanities Center. I'm joined by my colleague, Patrick Flanagan, who is our DH Center Programs and Operations Specialist and the recording and editing audio genius behind everything we do here. He'll be keeping an eye on chat, jumping in to answer questions that stump me, and I hope that you will stump me. And you'll actually get to hear his voice today because I had him record some audio so that we could hear him in this workshop. For those of you who are new to the workshop series, as I said, this is the third of 5. Everything that we've already done so far is up on our YouTube channel. And I will put those links in chat one more time for folks who are newly arrived. So we're going to talk all about editing today, and this is really going to be fun and a little, possibly a little overwhelming. And just keep in mind that what I'm showing you today is just to get you oriented to Audacity, or if you're an existing user, to refresh your use of it. But Audacity, like so many tools, is a use it or lose it tool. So if you don't immediately start using it and practicing what you learn, it's really easy to forget. And so don't worry about that. You can always revisit this recording or schedule a one-on-one consultation with myself or Patrick. And then next week, we'll talk about what you do once you're done editing and doing all the post-production of your podcast. Hang on a second, my slides aren't advancing. There we go. And just as a reminder, all the resources that we've created for this workshop series live in a public Google Drive folder that will keep going as long as we have access to Drive here. And that tiny URL will take you to all the slides, our tip sheets, our training videos, and some sample audio to play with if you're not ready to record your own. There's a podcast resources overview document that is sort of like a table of contents for all of the material. And if you're at an institution that's looking to create your own podcasting space, we have some spec sheets as well. And those of you who are not new to the workshop have heard me say this already, but this series is based on a week-long immersive podcast institute that the DH Center runs in partnership with the National Humanities Center out in North Carolina. If you want a deeper dive, if you want more of a hands-on experience working with an interdisciplinary cohort, then this institute will be right up your alley. We do an institute for graduate students in January and an institute in the summer for faculty, librarians, academic staff, independent scholars, folks like that. We don't yet have the link up for the Summer Institute, but if you are in a position to sponsor and send graduate students to the Institute in January, you can follow out the link, or you can follow up in an email with me at a future time. Okay, so what we're going to be doing today. We already started to get an introduction to Audacity, the tool that we use, but I'm going to do a deeper dive into Audacity. And we're going to cover some basic editing, in particular, how to improve recording sound quality if you can't get good sound capture for whatever reason. And then we're going to spend most of our time looking at how to create that multi-track where you have multiple voices and music and everything's isolated on its own track so that you can really get good control in post-production before you then mix it down into the final podcast. And I'm going to walk you through that whole process today, and hopefully there'll be enough time for you to see all of that. Just a reminder, now that we're starting to talk about bringing in different kinds of sounds, that we want to be mindful of copyright and try to use material that's in the public domain unless we can pay for licensing rights for music. If you are a musician or you have friends who are, you can always ask people to create original music for you and then always want to give them credit. Okay, so we're going to go into Audacity. I'm going to just cover a few things in the slides, and most of what I'm going to do today is going to be a live demo, but I'll keep the slides running for just a little bit so I don't forget some of the preliminary stuff. When you come into Audacity, one of the really lovely things is that it links you to the manual, which is a browser-based or web-based manual. And so you can always look things up. The tricky thing with Audacity is knowing what things are called, so you know where to look for help for things. And this is one of the areas where I struggle the most with Audacity and really with any tool, because I can never remember the official names of things and I end up making up my own names. And so I always like to have this screenshot as a reminder that that there are official names for things, and knowing those names will help you find answers to your questions. The thing that trips me up more than anything is this thing that is called the transport toolbar, but that's what allows you to traverse your track. And so you're transporting along the track. It's the only way I can remember it. For those of you who are not new to Audacity, if you've been using Audacity for a really long time, but you haven't updated Audacity, just go ahead and be mindful of that. There were some major changes from 2.0 to 3.0 when 3.0 was released a year or two ago, I think 2 years ago. Changes in how Audacity projects are saved and what's in the file, and changes in the kind of editing that you can do. In more recent releases, and we're currently in 3.3.3, more current releases are way more streamlined, easy to use, and there's a lot more features, most of which I'm not going to cover today. And so if you've been using Audacity for a while, you might want to check, and I would encourage you to update. You'll notice that I have many, many versions of Audacity on my computer, and that's because I like to keep older versions in case I'm working with someone who's in an older version. A couple other things to remember, like most tools, Audacity is not backwards compatible. So if you're using 2.0 and you update to 3.0, you'll be okay. But the project will transform. But if you're using 3.0 and you share a project file with someone who's using an older version, they won't be able to open your file. So just be mindful of that. And also be mindful of that Audacity is no longer supported in older Mac operating systems. And if you're using an older version of Windows, you will need to update your Audacity because of legacy concerns there. Last week, we talked quite a bit actually, about projects versus files. And I want to reiterate that. And again, you're going to see this today in action. The project is the sort of canvas or workspace where you're doing all the work. And the file is the set of audio clips that you're bringing in. Lately, I've been using the metaphor of baking to describe this because I really love to bake. if you think about how you make something, or if you prefer to use a cooking metaphor, that's fine too. You have your kitchen, which is your workspace. That's your project. And then you have all of the ingredients that you measure out and mix together. And those are your audio files. And then when you're ready, you mix it all together and you throw it in the oven and you bake it. Once you bake it, it's a transformed thing. You can't unbake it once it's baked, right? So you can't pull out a single ingredient once you've baked it. But as long as you still have ingredients, you can always go back, remeasure your ingredients, remix, rebake, and bake another version of the thing. So I'll keep coming back to that metaphor throughout our time together today. Again, as a reminder, there's many different types of audio files. Predominantly, we're going to be working with WAV files and MP3s. And MP3 are the more compressed files that you will need as your final version to put out onto the web. And so when we're talking about the Audacity project, we're talking about just an AUP3. And again, I'll point this out today. When we're talking about the files, we're talking about mostly WAVs and MP3s. And just as a reminder, depending on how you're recording, you might need to use, you might need to convert audio files. If you're using Zoom, or if you're using an iPhone, you'll get what's called an M4A, and that can't be opened in Audacity without either a plugin or converting it to an MP3. And I have tutorials on how to do that as well, but I'm not going to show that in real time. So just again, a reminder that we use different files for different purposes. So that large AUP3, that is our kitchen workspace. That includes like our counter and our bowls and our oven and all of that. And then we bring those individual files in to bake things together, the WAVs and the MP3s. This is in case you're interested. You don't really need to worry about compression anymore. It used to be that you could select whether to compress files or not. And I think in the latest version of Audacity, it sort of automatically does it. But essentially, when we're sending things out to live on the web, we need to compress things, which means there's a little bit of data degradation, what we call lossy. It's so minuscule, it's hard to notice, but it's really the only way to efficiently serve things out on a server. So you can't take a really large photo, which is in a TIFF file, a .tiff, and put that out on the web. It would take way too long to render and download. Similarly, a WAV file is likely going to be too big. That's why we need those more compressed MP3s. Okay, I'm going to skip over this because you're going to see this in action in just a moment. A couple things that I will point out to you. There's a couple really key navigation tools to help you traverse your workspace. You'll see me zoom in and out of the audio file, zoom out to get a big picture look at my file, zoom in to get a really good close look at where I need to do my edits. If you're doing any kind of manual transcription or any other kind of careful edits, play at speed can really help you. You can slow it down to really listen to things. I don't use that tool very much. There's a selection tool that allows you to select audio and traverse your audio track. In older versions of Audacity, for those of you who used to use it, you would have to click in and out of that selection tool. The newer versions of Audacity don't require you to do that, so it's become a lot easier. And then there is the bane of my existence, the playback loop, which I will demo. Let me make myself a note. I will demo that today. The bane of my existence, because we cannot get rid of this tool, and because people habitually accidentally click it and end up in a loop and think something's wrong. I'll show you what I mean by that, but just keep an eye out for that. That's one of the biggest things that people get tripped up on. We're going to focus today on some basic edits you can do using either your edit toolbar or your effects menu, and I'll show you all of that, including trying to improve the sound quality if you're not in a good recording space, and how to delete things like coughs, silences, or outtakes. We'll also talk about how to cut fade in and out and other things. Lots of tutorials out there on YouTube, so you can always go back to this and then explore other tutorials as well. All right, so I'm going to go into Audacity. Are you seeing Audacity?
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Okay, perfect. Okay, so we've already started to see Audacity a little bit last week, but now we're gonna do a deeper dive with the caveat that, again, I can't always remember the official name of things, so sometimes I end up making up names, which is confusing. But essentially, with Audacity, you have these toolbars, and you can see each one has a little bar next to it, and you can rearrange things. I am really uptight about where, oops, you can see I'm not good with my mouse, where things live, but you can rearrange things in any way you like. And you can also get rid of things. So I'm going to, under view, I'm going to hide the toolbars that I don't care about. Like the share audio toolbar gets in my way. For me, I like to have things in the same place, so I'm always clicking in the right place. But as we saw last time, we've got, here are our transport tools, our record, our pause. Pause can get a little tricky. I try not to use it too much. This allows you to skip to the beginning, this to skip to the end if we had audio in here. We can, and this is that pesky loop that I'll show you. We also have a zoom in and a zoom out, and I'll show you these tools. Trim audio outside of a selection, or silence a selection. And then our monitoring levels for recording and for playback. We also have a meter down here that allows you to find a precise moment in an audio file if you need to get to something in order to make an edit or something like that. And I've activated in my toolbars my device toolbar here, so that I can double check my inputs and outputs. So for instance, I was using Audacity the other day in a class where I wasn't in Zoom. So I had to change my output. And now, because I'm running Audacity through Zoom on a Mac, I need to use my Zoom audio device for y'all to hear what I hear. Okay, so what I'm going to do is bring in some audio and start to show you how to do things. I'm going to start with a file that I made. It's the very first audio file that I ever made. Right here. I'm just going to bring it in. Oh, I have to actually go to File and open this. I'm going to open up this file. And I'm going to open it because I have an empty Audacity workspace right now. So I have to start with something. And I'm going to bring this in. Okay. And what you're going to see is this is about not even 2 minutes. And it looks like not very good sound capture. And part of the way I know this is that my waveform looks really tiny, right? And if I go to the beginning and start to play it,
it's Wednesday, September.
You'll hear
20.
There's a lot of background noise, and I sound really kind of muffled. I recorded this as a voice memo on my phone wearing wired headphones while walking my dog on a city street in San Diego back in 2016. And I did that intentionally so that I could get bad sound capture. So what I want to do is try to strip out some of that background noise by basically building a noise profile and then telling Audacity to look for that profile and strip it out. What I want to do to begin with, though, is I noticed that it's very quiet.
Voice memos for the purpose.
And I can see that. So what I'm going to do is try to raise the amplification and then strip out that background noise. So one of the really interesting things about Audacity, it took me at least a year to figure this out, is I struggled to manipulate audio in Audacity. This is our track bed here, or our audio track. And if I click anywhere with my mouse, if I can jump to that part of the audio. So if I am clicked here,
with audio files,
it's going to start playing there. If I click here, it will jump to that part.
I'm not quite sure what section of the park.
If I want to select a part, I would click wherever I am and then hold down my mouse and drag it as far as I want. One of the great features in this new version of Audacity is I don't have to get it precise. Once I have a selection here highlighted, if I hover over either end, you'll see a hand icon, and that allows me to drag out my audio, to get a more precise capture. And then I can zoom in to see more of that. I'm going to show you the loop real quick. If I now hit loop, what it's going to do, and I'll zoom back out just a moment, it's going to play, actually, I don't want quite that much of a loop. Let's make it about that much. It's just going to play the loop over and over again.
In the creation of podcasts.
Let's make it smaller so we don't have to listen to it too much.
In the creation of podcasts. It's about 6:16 p.m.
You'll see I accidentally changed the loop and accidentally messed that up. So I'm not quite sure how I did that, but let's go to that part of the loop.
Through my neighborhood, after work, walking my dog. Walking through my neighborhood, after work, walking my dog. Walking.
Okay, and if you go to play, you're sort of stuck in this loop, and it's hard to notice that you're in the loop. You have to look for this. What we found was we were struggling to break the loop. And now all we need to do is if you hover up here on the sort of timeline and right click, you can clear that loop. And then you have to remember to take off that loop, the loop, you have to turn it off or you're going to keep looping. Okay, so now I'm out of my loop. I'm going to select a little bit and I can drag that. And you see I'm still a little clumsy with my mouse, but there I go. Now, for the longest time, I thought that I'd have to grab the whole audio and select it if I wanted to select the whole audio clip. And it was about maybe a year ago that I finally discovered here in my control track panel, this lovely select button that allows me to select the entire track. Once I do that, I can go up into my effect window and under volume and compression, I can actually amplify. And there's a whole science to this that I don't really understand. I'm just going to do a sort of random kind of amplification. That's probably a little too much. I'm going to undo that, go back again and try that one more time. Maybe just do 14.1, try to get more precise. And you'll notice the waveform looks really different now.
In the creation of podcasts.
It sounds a lot louder. So now what I'm going to do is try to build a sound profile. This requires some degree of silence. I did not record enough silence at the beginning of this, so I have to try to find a spot where there's some good silence. So for instance, here where I'm not talking, if I were in a soundproof room, if I weren't speaking, you'd see a flat, thin blue line. This is indicating to me that there is background noise. And if I play that, that's a pretty good amount of background noise there. So what I'm going to do is say to Audacity, look at this, analyze this section, apply it to everything, and try to take it out. So I'm going to find a good selection there. And under my effect window, under noise removal and repair, I'm going to go to noise reduction. And I'm going to say, use this pattern to get a noise profile. And then I'm going to select the whole thing. Let me zoom out a little bit here now and go back to the effect window and say, I can either preview it, I can adjust the reduction, the sensitivity, things like that. I'm just for the sake of what we're doing today, I'm just going to click OK. And you'll see things look a little different. And in fact, if I zoom in a little bit now, it's not quite a flat line, but it's a lot quieter. So if I zoom out and we go back to the beginning,
It's Wednesday.
it still sounds a little, there's still a lot of background noise there. So I might try that again on a different section. Sometimes it takes a couple tries and do that one more time by applying that profile to everything. And you see it's getting a lot thinner line there. And it's still there because I'm never going to fully get it out.
It's Wednesday, September.
But now I sound a lot tinnier. So all of that to say that there's some repair work that you can do on an audio file that doesn't have the best sound quality, but there are costs to doing that. And I might need to do some other things like normalization, which I only partially understand, to sort of smooth out the loud and the soft, the sort of range of loud and soft and other things to make it sound a little less tinny. But essentially, we can do some things like that. Again, the best bet is to try to control your recording environment as much as you can. If you're recording outside, make sure that you're accounting for things like the wind and other kinds of sound that can muffle your recording. And also, it's okay to have an imperfect file. If you listen to NPR at all, you'll hear when they're interviewing different experts, you can tell when someone's like in a space that's not set up for recording. They might sound more tinny, or they might be sounding more echoey, or there might be more reverb, and that's okay. I think we're at a place now in this stage of the pandemic that we're used to that. Okay, I'm going to now go into, and Patrick's putting lots of suggestions in the chat about other things you can do. If you're working with a file that's really, really messy like this, you can always reach out to, I would recommend starting with Patrick for some advice on different things you can try, because he's more of an audio file than I am. When you're done, you can just X out of what you're working in. Okay, so now let's start to work on an actual audio project. And I'm going to start using that baking metaphor again. And what we're going to do is take the recording that I made last week and start to create what's that multi-track. So if you remember from last time, I did a recording session, and I did a recording. I exported it out into an audio file, an MP3, and then I did another recording and made another version of it. And that turned into this AUP3. And we have two different MP3s because I did I baked two different cakes in that session. This was the original here, oops. And then I decided to add some icing, so I did another recording. I'm going to go in and open that project so you can see that. So this was the first recording that I did, and then the second. And it all lives as one track. So if I were to open up the MP3, this is the same thing as a different file format. This is now an MP3. This is the original project. So these are my two ingredients. This is ingredient 1 and ingredient 2. This is baked. I can't split up ingredient 1 and 2 at this point. I mean, at this point, it's easy enough. I can actually cut it and slice it and serve it up in a different way. But once I start adding tracks to this, it's going to get very complicated. Okay. I'm going to actually go ahead and rename this so I don't get confused, create a new project. Making sure I don't lose that period there for the file extension. Baking a podcast.aup3. Okay, so now if I go to my file directory, you're going to see I have the original podcasting recording session and now this new one. I'm going to, just to make sure that I'm not getting confused, I'm going to close out and go back into the new one. And now I have two different audio files. And if you recall from last week, Principles of Emergent Strategy by Adrienne Marie Brown. Let me do that over. Principles of Emergent Strategy. Okay. I listened to this last night and I made some notes to myself about places where I need to fix things. And so what I'm going to do for starters is start working on this file. Then I'm going to start to bring other files or other ingredients into my kitchen. So there's lots of different things that we can do to fix outtakes and false starts and things like that. And as a reminder, when you're recording, if you stumble, just pause, give yourself a little, wait a second or two, and then start over. You might want to backtrack and repeat where you tripped up so that you don't clip your words in editing. But you can begin to see all of these spaces where I either paused a lot or I had to start over. And as you get more experienced editing, you'll also see things like throat clearing or sneezes or irregular sounds because the waveform will look a little bit different. So this is where I cleared my throat. And it looks different from where I'm speaking in a much more regular voice or more controlled voice. Okay, so there's a couple things I can do. Because I have a false start, there's several ways that I can get rid of this audio. I can do what's called destructive editing, which means I can delete the audio, and get rid of it. So I could select the part that I want, always wanting to play it back to make sure I'm not messing it up. Principles of Emergent Strategy by Adrienne Marie Brown. Let me do that over. Okay, so I could either click, I could delete this. I'm not seeing the toolbar all of a sudden. There used to be a scissor toolbar somewhere up here, but now I'm not seeing it. Let me see if I'm missing a toolbar. Cut. There we go. I was missing it. I could click the cut here, so I could just cut it. Now, this is what's called destructive editing. It is gone, and the only way I can get it back is by going to Edit and Undo Cut. That's fine as long as I'm in this editing session. But if I cut it, and then I save my work and I exit Audacity, it will clear my undo history, and it will be gone forever. So we can do that if we're sure that we don't need it, or we can engage in what's called non-destructive editing, where we can trim it, but it's still there. And then when we mix it down and bake it, it will get cut out, but it's still in the original project. So, or I can do a mix of things. So for instance, let's say I like this intro and I like it more than this one. I could take this part here. Let me do that over. I could silence it by selecting it and clicking that silence audio selection, and now it's gone. But then it leaves me with a lot of extra silence. So I would still need to cut out that silence one way or another, either by now destructively editing it. Again, it's still there. So if I undo it, there it is. And again, if I cut it out destructively, I'll show you what that looks like. I'm going to save it. I can undo that cut, right? But let's redo that. Let's save our work and let's exit out. And now when I go back in, it's gone and I can't get it back. Principles of Emergent. So this is why when you're just getting started, you're going to want to always export your recording session as an MP3, because now I've destructively edited that. And if I accidentally got the wrong thing, I would have lost it forever. I'd either have to re-record it or go back to the original. So that's another reason why I resaved the project as something else, so that I have different versions of the original file. If I wanted to do non-destructive editing, what I can do is hover over the edge of a clip or a segment of my audio track. And if I hover over the beginning or the end, you'll see a double-headed arrow, and I can drag that either to the left or to the right to non-destructively edit. So now I've cut a whole bunch of audio. Oops, clicked the wrong thing there. Let me stop. Small is good, small is all. The large is a reflection of the small. So it's gone, but not gone forever. And if I trim that, save my work, and exit out, if I go to open it up again, it is still there. So destructive editing is something you would do that's an actual like cutting it out if you're absolutely certain you don't need that thing. Non-destructive editing is a great tool for you're still getting comfortable, you're not sure. And again, you can do that on either side like that. But now let's say, and of course now I've made some cuts and changed, I've noted the timing of where the things are that I need to fix. Sorry, there's drilling right next door and I just heard that. But now my timings are all messed up because I started moving things along the track bed and the times are a little bit weird. But I think this is a mistake here. Okay, so here, again, I can silence it, but let's say I want to do some destructive editing or non-destructive editing. What I would have to do is essentially create a slice in the audio to get rid of that. So I would click wherever I want to be, and I could either go to Edit, Audio Clips, Split, or going on the other side, find where, and here I need to zoom in a little bit more. I can do the same thing, but right instead of, once I've clicked where I want to be, and I can use this meter to verify that I'm in the right place, I can right click and do that same split. Then if I hover my hand over the label of the segment, I can drag it over. Now, if you've used Audacity in the past, you'll remember this as the timeline shift tool. And it used to be a button you had to click. You had to leave your what's called your selector tool here and keep clicking in and out. And this newer version of Audacity does not require this. So it's way easier to navigate your audio track. So this here is the part I wanted to get rid of. And I can just select it. Now I could either destructively edit it, although why would I? I would just smush it down, bring this audio back. You'll notice it's not wanting to let me go because I have to kind of move. It's still there. And I need to now create enough space to bring this audio over. So for instance, I can rearrange things, but only if there's enough room in the track. So I can move it all the way over here just by dragging it. You just hover over that label until you see the hand icon and sort of keep dragging. But you need to make sure that you leave yourself enough space to do it like that. For now, I'm going to keep things in order, and I might want to rename things so that I don't get confused. So that's 1. This is going to actually be 2, and here's 3. Now that I'm creating some clips here. And then I might need to do some more work to change things here. I don't really remember where the mistakes are anymore. Move at the speed of trust. I think maybe here. I think this part here I repeated. Less prep, more presence. Less prep, more presence. Okay. So again, I can do some of that either non-destructive editing or destructive editing. In this case, I think I might just destructively edit. So let's say I get rid of that. I'm just clicking the delete button on my keyboard. And then here as well. Here I'm going to actually do a slice just in case I make a mistake. So I'm going to split my clip on either side. And actually, that's all I need to do, because now all I need to do is just non-destructively edit it up to here, bring it together, and let's listen to that. Less prep, more presence. What you pay attention to grows. Okay, and then I'm going to just non-destructively edit. You caught that little breath that I took at the end, maybe. Grows. And I got rid of that too. Now, so I don't get confused, I'm going to give this a name. This is going to be emergent strategy. I don't have enough room for that, so I'll just call it ES. And as I zoom out, I can actually now see that I have, it looks like 4 clips. And I can move them around and have different pacing in between them. So another thing to note, and I'm seeing that we're actually already at 1:45, and so I need to speed things up a little bit, is that you can do destructive editing if it's just you speaking. But the minute you start to bring in other voices that are synced, you're going to start to have a problem. Let me save what I'm doing and show you what I mean. I'm going to now import 2 audio files. This was a colleague of myself, Cassie and myself, having a conversation. Here, small is all. Oops, let me mute the top track so you can only hear these 2.
Hello, everybody.
Yeah, awesome. So
So if so we accidentally spoke over each other, and if I wanted to delete that, if I do a destructive edit there, we are going to be out of sync.
with people who are not in the same room. Yeah, awesome.
Hello, everybody.
Right. So what I would have to do in that case is, in order to keep it synced, I would have to silence it by silencing that audio selection.
People who are not in the same room.
Hello, everybody.
Yeah, awesome. So
So if I'm having a conversation with someone and I need to silence somebody, I have to do either silencing or non-destructive editing and keep everything synced up. If I needed to do that, though, what I could do is, let me just make these a little, I'm going to shrink each track so you can see it a little bit more. I would need to basically keep these things together. So what I could do is, let's say I wanted to, oops, what's going on there? Let's say I wanted to splice a little bit of this and change things up a little bit. Let me zoom in a little bit. I can right click here. Actually, let's do it right there. And then I would want to do the same. That's in a bad spot. I'll start here. I'm going to edit that. I'm going to split that clip. And then I'm going to do the same thing below. And to get it lined up, I'm going to try to put my cursor in the same place. And as soon as I see that yellow vertical line, I know I'm in the right place. And I'm going to split that as well. What that allows me to do is now I can grab this clip and, holding my mouse down, drag my mouse down, and now I can move both things and keep them synced. So as you begin adding more audio or more ingredients into your kitchen workspace or your project workspace, you need to start thinking about how you're importing stuff and how you're going to keep things synced up. I'm going to actually get rid of those two files. I'm going to unmute this, but now I'm going to actually start to bring in some audio files. I'm going to bring in first some of Patrick. There we go. And here is some audio that Patrick recorded yesterday.
Hello, my name is Patrick Flanagan. I am the Digital Humanities Center Programs and Operations Specialist at the Digital Humanities Center at San Diego State University Library. When I was in Bloom, my heroes encouraged to make your own art, be your own band, to own your own voice that is unique to you. I am an Arsenal fan. I am the artistic entity known as Punk Rock Drum Machine. I am a human of many voices.
Many
voices.
endless voices.
I'll tell you what. Good day.
So Patrick was having a little bit of fun there, which was awesome. And what you'll notice is one thing I've done is I've muted my top track so that I'm only listening to his. If I unmute, we're going to hear both tracks playing whenever they're overlapped.
At San Diego State
Principles of
University
Emergent
Library.
Strategy by Adrienne
When I was
Marie
in
Brown.
Bloom,
Right. And that's chaotic. So we would need to space things out in such a way. So for this, I might want to do some slicing of his audio and do some splitting. I'm just sort of randomly doing this. And maybe what I want is I'll have Patrick start us off. And then I'll sort of interweave our voices a little bit. I'm going to just select these three, drag them down here, bring Patrick here, and then take these two, move them down here. And if I do it this way, and
hello,
actually, let's so in the interest of
Digital
time,
Humanities Center at San Diego State
Principles of
University
Emergent,
Library.
right? And so we overlap there. So maybe I would need to fade Patrick out a little bit here where I start talking, or I could just move my voice. Sorry, I'm having issues today with my mouse. There we go. Why is it not? Oh, all right. What's going on here? It's not letting me select things for some reason. Okay. All right, this one, for whatever reason, is stuck where it is. I don't know why. So I'm going to just hope for the best here. Patrick, have you ever seen this happen before? Oh, I know why. I think there's another piece. There we go. I had another piece.
All right.
I had destructively edited this or non-destructively edited it, and it was in the way. So that's what was happening there. So now I've spaced it out a little bit here. Okay. So now if we're playing it.
San Diego State University Library.
Principles, and I could do a sort of crossfade a little bit where I have him fade out while I come back in. For the purposes of what we're doing, I'm just going to leave it like this and keep adding more audio. Now what I want to do is add maybe some intro music. I'm going to go to import under my file menu, click audio, go to music and get a little bit of music here. A couple things that you might notice is that the waveform is way bigger here. And that's because it's, this is music and it was recorded in different conditions. Rather than try to de-amplify, I'm going to actually just use what's called the gain slider and lower it. It's not going to change the way that the waveform looks, but I know that it's going to change the amplitude. I also probably only want a little bit of it, so I'm going to non-destructively edit it. My apologies, I keep confusing destructive and non-destructive editing. So maybe take about that much. And to make it smoother, I'm going to do a little fade in by selecting a bit of audio. And obviously, if I were doing a real edit, I would be listening over and over again to make sure this is working. But under my effect window, I'm going to go under the fading menu. I'm going to do a fade in. Now, the other issue is that, oftentimes when we have an intro, we don't have voiceover at the same time. So what I need to do is kind of shift everything over. So I'm going to select, drag and hold my mouse down, drag it across while I'm selecting all of these clips and select Patrick. And now they're all kind of locked together. I'm going to move us over to about here. And now if we listen to this, we'll hear that fade in.
Hello, my name is Patrick Flanagan.
Still a little too
I'm
loud.
the Digital Humanities Center Programs and Operations Specialist
Lower
at
that
the
gain
Digital
again.
Humanities Center at San Diego State University Library.
Principles of emergent. And there we go. And I would actually probably drag this so that it ends right around when I start speaking, or I could have a little bit more and right where I start speaking, do a fade out. So it's a little smoother. Okay. I need to keep making these beds, these track beds these audio tracks a little smaller because I'm running out of real estate on my screen. Now, if you want to have your tracks stacked in chronological order so that the intro is the very first thing, well, first I'm going to rename it intro. And I could actually, under my control track panel, say move up or move to the top. I could also change the color of my waveforms to help me edit a little bit better. So let's say I want my voice to be green. I can make Patrick black, or let's make him red. There we go. And now I could move Patrick up. And so now you can see as you play your audio file, as you go left to right from 0 seconds up through 2 minutes, it's going to play left to right, and anything that's stacked vertically will play at the same time. So now let me go ahead and bring in one more track by going to import. Actually, let me save my work. Now what I'm going to do is I have another audio project that I want to use. This is a project we recorded here in the DH Center. And what you'll notice is we did 5 takes. Our Center for Teaching and Learning Director, DJ Hopkins, asked me to record the intro to his podcast. And I did 5 takes or 6 takes. Faculty Futures Lab is a faculty-led effort. I don't like that one. So in this case, you'll see all these different clips, right? Let's say I only wanted to grab one of these. What I would want to do is I'll just copy this by selecting that portion and hitting Control C. And then in my full project, my kitchen workspace, under track, I'm going to add a new stereo track, and I'm going to just paste it in. Now it's asking me, do I want to use everything or just the selected audio? In this case, just the selected audio. I don't want all that other stuff. And now I have a different intro, and I'm going to use it actually as an outro. Put it here. And now I've just added a new track with just that segment.
Faculty Futures.
And let's say I actually want a different take. I can actually, in this case, I might just undo that paste, go back to, I basically have two test kitchens that I'm working in here. And let's say I want to use the goofy version that they made me record at the very end. I'm going to copy that. I'm going to just paste it. Again, I just want the selection, not the full clip. I'll bring it in. And if you want to listen to it, you'll hear a little bit of background voices. Into grows.
Okay, I'm going to count you in. 4, 3.
Faculty Futures Lab is a faculty-led effort to consider the challenges facing institutions of higher education in complex and uncertain times. All guests speak from their own expertise and experience. Produced by the San Diego State University Center for Teaching and Learning. Learn more at ctl.sdsu.edu.
Nailed it. I really like it.
So that's going to be our outro. I'm going to add a little bit, I'm going to import some final music. Just to make this sound really good. I'm going to do that non-destructive editing. I'm going to shrink this down so I can see everything. Oops. There it is. I think I accidentally moved it. And then we're going to do like I'm going to start it maybe here. I want it to end before my laughter. I'll do a nice long fade in under my effect window and a nice long fade out, and it would sound a little bit like this.
In complex and uncertain times. All guests speak from their own expertise and experience. Produced by the San Diego State University Center for Teaching and Learning. Learn more at ctl.sdsu.edu.
Nailed it. I really like it.
Okay. So now in my thing that I'm baking, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 audio tracks or 5 ingredients. So now let's do this. Let's mix it all together, bake it, and see what comes out of the oven. So under File, I'm now ready. So first of all, I'm gonna save what I'm working on. Remember, save is an action just for the project or that kitchen workspace. And then I'm going to export this as a, not as a wave. I'm going to export it as an MP3. I'm going to make sure I'm putting it where I want it. And I'm going to give it a versioning name, version 1. I'm going to save it. And now it's saying it's going to mix it all down. This is where the baking happens. And this is what I want to happen. I'm going to give it some metadata. Which I can't type this quickly. This is season 1, episode 1, 2023. It's a podcast. I'm going to get rid of all this stuff. This is just from the music I downloaded from the Internet Archive. I'm sorry, the Free Music Archive. Click OK. Okay, now it looks like nothing has happened, and that's because I have mixed it down into something new. And if I go to my file directory, this is what I've made it into. If I go to open it, it's going to open in my default media player, which is Apple Music. And you'll see this metadata here, DH Podcast Workshop Series. Just because we're running out of time, let me open this with Audacity so you can see what that looks like. So now these 6 or 7 or 5 or 6, however many tracks I have, are now the one track. So this is the baked thing. And now if I look here and maybe realize that my audio levels were off, there's a conversation. I needed to fix that and I forgot to do that. So what I would have to do now is remeasure those ingredients in my kitchen and mix it down again. That would be right. Oh, I think it's here is where it was too loud. I needed to fix that. There's a conversation in the room. Or let's say I wanted to get rid of a bit of it. Let's say I wanted to make this shorter. I could delete some of this. I'm just going to do some, actually, I don't want to do destructive editing. Let's say I want to do some non-destructive editing here and get rid of some of that stuff. And then I can move all of this down. To there, make it shorter. Save the, if I save it, I'm going to actually save it as another, well, no, I'm going to leave. I'll just save that work. Just because we're running out of time and I realized we are at the top of the hour, I'm just going to mix this down one more time and give it another name. This is version 2. Save it. I've rebaked it. And now I have a shorter version of the file. So we are out of time. I apologize. A couple quick things to remind you of. I will have the recording of this up on YouTube once I'm able to process the transcript. Next week, we're going to talk about what happens when you're ready, after you've done the post-production and you're ready to put it out into the world. I'll answer any questions also that you didn't have a chance to ask today or last week. And then all of these resources will persist for as long as they can. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. I'll keep the Zoom running in case folks have additional questions. But for those who were able to join us in real time, have a wonderful weekend. For those of you watching this asynchronously, I hope you are good wherever you are.